Okay. Welcome to everyone who's here. You can't see me, but this is the September 21st Climate Crisis Response Committee meeting. Welcome. Oh, everyone.
Hey, this is Angela Long. I'm assuming that others on virtually cannot hear the room. Okay.
Thank you, Angela.
We can hear you now, I believe. Well, Kat, you're muted, but we did hear you.
Thank you, Angela.
We can hear you now, I believe. Well, Kat, you're muted, but we did hear you.
Do you hear the echo? Hi, everyone. I think we resolved it and solved the mystery. Can you all hear us? Excellent. And we are not hearing an echo so far. Thank goodness. That was awful. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Jane if you want.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Kat. Let's start with introductions. We've got a big group out tonight. Thanks everyone for coming. Welcome to the Climate Crisis Response Committee first meeting of this school year. My name is Jane Como. I am a PPS parent of a couple of kids at Beverly Cleary School. And I have been chairing this committee since we started last year. I'll pass it over to you, Charity.
Charity Fain. I have 2 kids at Sunnyside Environmental School in the middle school there. And in my day job, I run a nonprofit called Community Energy Project, and we do climate justice and energy efficiency for low-income households. So get to wear multiple hats here.
I'm Tim Ellie. I'm with PAE Engineers. We're working on the PPS decarbonization plan project, which we wanted to talk about today.
I'm Ari Edinger. I am the Climate Resiliency Program Manager at PPS. And I'm going to join you all at the table shortly. I'm just going to keep my eye on the door for a few more seconds here.
Hi, everyone. Aaron Pressberg, Senior Manager of Energy and Sustainability at PPS.
Hey, everyone. I'm Kat Davis. I'm the Advisor for Climate Justice here at PPS.
Let's go around the room and then we'll get to the online people.
Great. Hi, I'm Nathan Stroud from O Planning and Design.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deb France, also with O Planning and Design. We're part of the PAE team working on the decarbonization.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Riley Loveland, New Buildings Institute, and I also wear the Oregon Green Schools hat. So I do a bunch of different school stuff, but here on the PAEO and Amoresco team.
And Jerry Glenn with Amoresco, from PA team.
Isaac Barrow, I'm the PPS Climate Response Committee, parent of 2 girls, both who were PPS, but one is now moving to Unilow tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And the other is a junior at Grant, both went through the Japanese.
How about the person sitting in public?
Oh, I'm just watching. My name is Frank Campus O'Brien. I'm the Benson Polytechnic High School software assist.
Thanks for coming.
I didn't mention my kids. So I got 6 kids in PPS.
Oh,
The last one just graduated from Lincoln and is off to Paris.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Design. So it was cheaper.
Wow.
But anyway, we've had a great experience at PPS in Lincoln and various elementary and middle schools. So I'm really committed to the district and hopeful for the future.
I'm all on board with Europe is cheaper. Youngest, one of her friends is going to the Czech Republic, and I'm like, don't you want to go to selfie?
Let's go to you, Angela, and then hand it over to someone else online, please.
Hi, Angela Long. I have I'm part of the committee as well. I have one child in PPS at Selwood Middle School. And I'll pass it off to Jesse.
I'm Jesse Nomaki. I am part of the AmeriCorps Confluence Group working as under CAT in the Climate Justice Department. And I am a 2003 graduate from Lincoln High School. So I'll pass it off to Rosie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosie Goity. Similar to Jesse, I am serving as an AmeriCorps member with CAT in the Climate Justice Department. And I will pass it off to Diane.
Thanks, Rosie. I'm Diane Riley. I'm a member of the Climate Crisis Response Committee, and I have a student, fourth grader at Richmond Elementary, and I'll pass it off to, is it Ruan?
Ruan, yeah.
Ruan.
Yeah.
Thanks for the correction.
No worries. Yeah, I'm Ruan Jawer. I'm a mechanical engineer principal at PAE. So again, part of the decarbonization team. Nice to meet everybody.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Just so you know, we are having a hard time hearing you folks that are joining us virtually. People are working to increase the volume, but if you are talking as we move forward and it seems like we're straining, that's why we'll let you know though.
Sorry, can I have someone from the virtual world try talking again?
Testing.
Oh, that's better. Okay.
We're learning so much about
problem solved. Okay. Pat, do we have anyone for public comment today?
We do not. I was informed someone wanted to submit public comment like written, so I will circulate that to the committee if that comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And the first item on our agenda is policy progress and 23-24 scopes of work update from staff.
Yeah, and we can so my goal today was sharing an update about the policy progress and how we're moving forward is really around sharing with you all how we are starting to coordinate communicating and highlighting all the different strands of work that are happening at PPS and also delineating between updates on how the policy is being adopted as a district versus this is something that one of our software folks that help with our dashboards have been really helpful with me delineating is the policy progress versus the climate action plan, because I think a lot of times, especially internally and with the community, we talk, the policy does such a good job of outlining the priority areas that it's easy to think that is the climate action plan. And then in reality, we're still working on developing that plan that has the really specific deliverables with outcomes and tangible things that we will be measuring to show how we are honoring this policy progress, if this makes sense to delineate. So that has been really helpful in me identifying how to best communicate to you all how all of this work is moving forward. I'm not sure if anyone else was grappling with that difference besides me, but in terms of how to communicate how we're moving forward on these different goals, I think that will be really successful.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
So I hear what you're saying, and I think that's helpful to differentiate between a policy and a climate action plan.
Yeah.
Do you see the climate action plan as different from the decarbonization roadmap? We're talking about 3 different things then?
Yeah, so the decarbonization roadmap will inform
the plan?
how our climate action plan plays out. It will help inform how we will meet our goals that are in our climate action plan, if that helps. So our climate action plan would include activities that would help. I'm going to share my screen really quick. That would help with oh my gosh.
So I don't think we've seen a climate action plan yet. Right?
Correct. That's what's in the works right now, and so what we here, sorry, 1 second, let me there we go. Okay. I can't compute and talk at the same time. Here we go. So I've shared in the past our policy progress dashboard, which okay. This window. There we go. Which we've talked about in a couple of different ways, and I've like grappled with how to present how we're moving forward on our policy in a couple of different iterations over the last year. And so this is kind of an overarching framework that shows how we're making progress overall on like where we will see wide scale adoption of implementation of the policy at a large scale as a guiding entity, and how that's saturating into our different departments at the district, and may require further policies, resolutions, or standards to be adopted in order to meet and really systemize our policy goals. And then something that we've talked about as a committee a lot is what kinds of actual materials progress is moving forward to honor and realize those different those policy goals. So for instance, we have like an example of, how we want to maximize carbon sequestration and other environmental benefits of green schoolyards, and, having specific tangible deliverables or scopes of work or materials progress that we can communicate as how we're honoring this goal of the policy, right? And so our action plan will have the deliverables or the target, the key indicators that will show how that policy goal is fully realized. So that goal may be realized by having identifying and defining what we consider to be a green schoolyard, and then having 100% of our schools have green schoolyards. And then we can say we have this green schoolyard inventory. We can say that as of right now, we're, let's say, 10% of the way to our goal. Our goal is to get there by 2050 or what have you. And so our decarbonization roadmap is the opportunity to show how we're going to meet and measure and make progress on the deliverables related to our 2030 and 2040 carbon goals, but also help define how we're going to really make progress on a lot of these pillar 1 goals related to carbon.
So there is really like a nesting, decarbonization roadmap fits with climate action. Doesn't encompass all the aspects of climate action. And there may even be aspects of the policy pillars, policy itself, that are beyond the climate action.
Yeah.
Depending on how broad the climate action plan actually is.
Yeah, exactly. Because what I've seen with other school districts and their action plans is a focus, on carbon, on green schoolyards, on curriculum, on transportation, and things like that. And I think we have some more pillars in here related to resilience, which is really important. But that's, I think, what we've been grappling with over the last year as we've been identifying what stakeholders are existing, what scopes of work currently exist, and how to best measure progress towards these goals. What is now coming into realization, and the scopes of work over this next year for 23-24 are really going to be these larger defining projects that really show how we're going to make this progress in a way that's going to be cohesive and efficient. So that includes our decarbonization roadmap. It includes defining our green schoolyards goals and inventory. It includes getting a better understanding of what our climate resiliency plans need to look like, so we can have a goal of how that's moving forward. And what I've heard from the committee, and what I'm trying to honor through this type of interim dashboard, as we work on like the larger public facing dashboard that's going to be a lot easier to digest and use and have a lot more information on it, is this the desire to see the scopes of work that are moving forward on the ground. So I've started to populate that from where I have gotten this information across from meeting with different stakeholders across the district with really exciting updates. Things like, right now we've got 28 sites with reusable utensils and adding in addition 7 this fall. So like little wins like that you can see tangible progress making change over this next year. And that kind of work will be captured in this larger dashboard as well as on our website that we gave a sneak preview to at our orientation, and we'll be doing a full launch of in October, ideally, where you'll be able to see what the story is of what the policy really looks like on the ground in action and the spirit of the policy through different kinds of ways of having stories and like really showing, making all of this more tangible.
Hey, Kat, sorry to interrupt you. This is Angela. There were 3 things that Jane asked you about, and I just want to make sure that I understand. Thank you for all that information, but I was kind of got lost. So we have the decarb roadmap, which informs the climate action plan. We have the climate action plan, which will have all the key indicators. And then what's the last thing I'm missing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then there's also the larger kind of policy itself that is, we're talking like there will be an indicator on our dashboard of what it looks like and have like a 5-year policy adoption process and what kinds of things need to move forward to have that, like where can we consider this policy being like adopted in the district. And then other scopes of work over the next year I've mentioned at our orientation, and I'm excited to bring up here again, is the development of an engagement pathways design process to really define what that pillar 3 work is going to look like. Really, we've got.
So Kat, sorry.
Go ahead.
So the policy adoption is the dashboard. This is what you're saying. So we'll have those 3 things to look at: roadmap, the action plan, and then the dashboards are really the policy, how it's getting adopted.
Yeah, on the policy side of things, I have that kind of up here as this like administrative section of like what this looks like for the policy to be, from what we understand as like adopted at the district. That includes like an evaluation plan, which we started progress on last year and will finish this year, which will inform this like climate action plan, because an evaluation plan shows how we will be able to make action on our policy goals. The public facing dashboard, and then lastly, a district-wide staff advisory group that has stakeholders from across different departments that each touch work related to the policy or are involved in systems that make the district operate, that need to be at the table in order to really systemize this work. So thank you for asking that question in a way that helped my brain organize this thought. And so when I'm talking about policy adoption, as one scope of work, those are the 3 big things I would say we're working on over this year to move the policy as a whole forward within the district, and then to make progress on specific goals underneath the policy and to inform our evaluation plan and our adoption plan or climate action plan, if you will. We're doing things like the decarbonization roadmap, the engagement pathways design, and better defining and creating a more clearly defined vision for our green schoolyards inventory as probably our top 3 scopes of work, with all of these other scopes still continuing because they just have been in process for a long time and will continue to be in process across different sites, and figuring out ways to create a map or some way for the community to actually be able to toggle and see like what schools do have reusable utensils right now, what schools do have reuse programs, and like have access to community facing compost versus just back of house compost. Like those are the kinds of questions we're trying to also answer so that we can really create a solid picture of what PPS is doing around all of this work, because there's so much activity going on, which is very exciting. And so this framework will be distilled into our Invisio dashboard, which I also shared at the orientation and can share an example of, again, if that would be helpful. And then this is for like later in the committee meeting, but one of the working groups that was discussed at the orientation was a dashboard committee. And if folks want to be involved on that, then I would, I'll schedule like, a regular update to kind of work through what translating all of this into a usable public facing dashboard looks like when we have that Invisio structure built out.
At the risk of derailing your overall presentation, I also would like to understand how the evaluation plan fits in. So I'm just talking like at a kind of document level. I think this is also what Angela was wondering about is this nesting that Isaac referred to. So decarb plan feeds into the climate action plan, which is underneath the umbrella of the climate policy itself as a document. So as a document or a deliverable, the evaluation plan is where?
Yeah, so the evaluation plan will give us, will provide the kind of procedural document that shows not only what key performance indicators with each goal need to be tracked in order to adequately decide if we're making progress, but also the survey like tools or data collection tools and techniques that we can use to track that data to see if we're making progress. So the evaluation plan will like inform the indicators that are measured with the climate action plan and just tell us how we will be measuring across the district performance towards those goals.
So it's developing metrics, figuring out how to collect the data.
And all of that will, the climate action plan that I'm hoping to have by the end of this school year is more of a high level kind of like, what's our North Star goal? What is it that we're shooting for with each of these primary target areas that really capture the work that is the spirit of this policy? And then where is our current state? So we can identify like how much progress we've made on that goal, as well as having kind of a high, like a portrait of how we want to get there. So it's kind of a high level, the definition of goals that we can have on our website that say like, this is where we're headed and this is what this policy is going to look like on the ground. Like it's going to be 100, like all of our buses are going to be, electric vehicle. This is what percentage of we are on the way there and things like that. Yeah. And so the evaluation plan tells us how we're going to measure progress for all the steps in between. So we can start to prioritize funding and really think about how we structure future systems and processes so that we're tracking the right stuff to make sure that we are able to communicate how we're making progress, or also like be able to understand how much further we have to go within a certain time frame so that we can start to really advocate for the budget that we need to do that. It's a lot of like defining and building and flying the ship at the same time. And so this is just my kind of high level way of trying to articulate the deliverables that we plan to have by the end of this year, but also keep you all posted on like the just exciting, fun on the ground things that are happening at the same time. Because I think those are what really keep us going and excited about this work, is seeing it happen. So.
Yeah, which I really appreciate. Like I still do see value in this dashboard for our committee and for this process as it continues. So thank you.
Yeah, and if it's helpful.
Thank you for explaining that. I apologize I couldn't be there in person. You know what might be helpful at some point is to have like a flow chart where all this stuff lives and how it all fits together.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know. And if it's helpful, I can share an example of how we currently use this public facing dashboard for our strategic plan process so that you can see kind of what it looks like for that. And then can imagine how it might work for our policy. Because I think that's where it's going to be really helpful. Seems like a helpful activity at the moment. I don't want to take up too much time, so
Did you have more you were going to speak to on the dashboard?
Nope, that is all.
Did anybody have any other comments about the dashboard or questions? One thing that I noticed is like I can see that the activity, it's just a little bit confusing to my eye, and this will come with time once we have these defined metrics for the goals themselves, but it sort of looks like we're on track for meeting that goal. But I think what you're saying is we're on track for meeting that activity. It's one of the things that will help meet that goal. So I might just move that status column over to the other side of the activities. I mean, that's just a detail, but because I at first I was looking at this and I was thinking like my critical hat on, oh, are we on track to meet that, goal 1.1? Because that's a pretty lofty situation that I don't know that PPS is like, if we graphed the GHG reductions so far and we want to get to net zero by 2040, we need to like change the curve still. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's just.
Well, I think that's what I was trying. Thank you for clarifying that part of it, because what I was trying to get at is that the climate action plan will have clear outcomes and metrics that will help us show whether or not we're on track, that have a specific timeline, because these goals as written don't actually have that. And so there really is like, how are we on track to maximize reductions in greenhouse gas emissions? Yeah, we're working our best to like have standards to do that. But with and it shows like the different activities that are currently on track to be completed to make that happen. But what the action plan will provide is a really tangible look at like, what does that mean on the ground, which has just been the work over the last year. And I definitely heard the concern about like planning to make a plan and things like that. That's why I wanted to show like materials progress of like, no, there's things happening. We don't know exactly what all of this is we don't have it laid out anywhere solid of like what goal 1.2 really looks like from a 100% completed, measurable, a SMART goal, I guess, if you will, the specific measurable, goal, relevant. So the goal is to create SMART goals related to each of these policy goals. And so that's what I was saying at the beginning, where like, there's the policy implementation process of like, making sure the right procedures and policies and systems are in place to make sure that we will always be maximizing reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from district operations. What does that look like? That looks like best practices. That looks like a resolution maybe. And so those are policy activities. And then there's the action plan activities, which is, I think from what I've gathered, what is what the community and the committee is really, really interested in, which is like, how are we going to actually like, what does the action look like around this policy? And that's those measurable things that we will have in our dashboard. And I apologize if I just said the same thing over again and it still didn't make as much sense. It's kind of a heady thing to be sharing.
One thing that I don't see, and sorry if it's there, but any kind of tracking on work that I'm sure is going on around budgeting and funding and plans that you already like, I can't assume you're waiting for all the plans to be done to think about money.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So where in that is like, what are you doing as a district on applying for federal grants as they come out, planning for bond, like, there's nothing in there about like the planning process on how everything gets paid for.
That's a good point that's not in this dashboard, because I think it's really at this point up to each of the departments to be allocating their budget in a way that's going to be moving this work forward. So we're in the process right now of talking about and planning for the next bond. And so there's discussions around what that can look like around this work. And then
it would be useful though for us to have something like information about that process.
And I will say too, yeah, and that's
because that's going to be where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah. So there is also, I did include in here, the EPA grant. The ones that are pending right now are things that we applied grants for. So we have this, 25 buses that we applied for with the EPA grant that came out for the electric vehicles. We applied for this in partnership with Grow Portland, another grant. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry. There's multiple. There we go. So the Zoom people looking at the screen, just saying, just not the in-person. Yeah. So the PDL grant. So, and so there are like larger discussions too about what's going on, like what we need to be planning for with the general funds budget and federal, but those are things that, for instance, this roadmap will help us identify what kind of money we need to be talking about putting towards that. And so I can say that this is a big part of why that's not in here is because it really is just like each it's still very decentralized in how this is moving forward with the funding part of it. And I'm working on like trying to coordinate what all of that looks like from this perspective. So it doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means that like it's not reflected in this quite yet.
Yeah, and I could see if it's so decentralized, it's gonna be a very.
It's something we're working on the process. Yeah, it's definitely not. And then also just the, you know, things like a bond or a very, you know, it's a delicate kind of political process that we want to be really careful with what we're sharing and everything. And so I think just knowing that like these are the conversations that we're having, and I'll definitely be able to provide updates once we have some more information on how that's moving forward.
I do agree with the sentiment that Jane was expressing, that there is a little bit of disconnect between the sentiment that I think we shared on presentation in June, and we discussed in orientation last month, where we're not sure that the pace of progress and the resources assigned are sufficient to actually meet the policy goals versus the amount of on track that's shown. And like in the preview of the dashboard is 60% complete. So like
no, that's the strategic plan.
Sorry.
That's not our dashboard. I was just trying to show it an example
like
of what the strategic plan.
in our
process.
dashboard, how do we convey the fact that we all realize there's a needed hockey stick effect that
Yeah.
we're trying to influence? Like, how do we convey the fact that the current level of resources is insufficient?
We do that by quantifying what the outcomes need to be for each of these goals and saying, we're only 2% of the way there and we've got a couple of years to go, well, like 7 years to, you know what I mean? Like that's how that would work.
It'll be easier once those are done.
Once those are
Yes.
tangibly done. And
Yeah,
so
I
that's
agree.
where the, you know, this committee I think will be really helpful over this next year is, I have this amazing AmeriCorps team. You've met Jesse and Rosie now, and then Hannah's back again another year. They're each taking on a pillar to do research to really, and this is also where Echo Northwest work will come in, and they'll be a lot more involved in this committee this year. Now that we have a vision of like how all this is going to move forward, and they're all doing research and best practices to help us define, okay, this is what this goal can look like by, let's call it the 2040 date or 2050 date. And then and really hit the ground running with because a lot of this is what our departments are struggling with too, is like, okay, great, you want us to focus on, you know, green schoolyards, but who is making the decision about what defines its green schoolyard and how many schools need to have them, and you know, what does it look like on the ground, and then you know, that kind of thing. And if it's not defined and prioritized and we don't have that rubber stamp of approval, so something that I'm hoping that to be able to present to the board and have the committee, you know, really vet and adopt these make sense as like tangible goals to work for. And then the board ideally give their stamp of approval of like, yes, this makes sense for the targets we need to work towards. And then comes the hard conversation of, well, we all just set these targets. Now we really need to be funding these targets. And as you know, there's a lot of conversation about what we're funding right now and like how to meet all of the different priorities we have with a finite budget. So that's when the extra grants come in and things like that. But that's just to give you an idea of, I think that's where we will be able to better see what is really on track and, you know, on progress is once we can have those measurable outcomes. And it's just been a process to get the tangible metrics really decided on, because I could totally go in and make arbitrary numbers, but I want to make sure that it's community informed and really includes, you know, student engagement and staff expertise, as well as research on best practices. But I do think it's something that's achievable. My ambitious goal is to have a draft of that for you all to review in the March meeting. So if that helps give you an idea of that timeline, but that's my dream.
Is that something that you expect to involve us in along the way too? Like
Absolutely.
getting to that draft, so we'll be able to see okay, and be part of developing a climate action plan.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, I think that would be fantastic. We have amazing applicants for our student positions, which the board will be voting on October 10th. So I will have updates on the recommendations we're making by Monday when those materials are due. But because of our amazing applicants, we're also launching the Climate Justice Youth Advisory backup now that we have like a really tangible, like this is what the students could really help advise on, is like, are these ambitious enough goals? Are these clearly defined goals? How are we, you know, that kind of thing. But that's really the work over the next year, is like really defining okay, great, we have green schoolyards. What is a green schoolyard? What is an outdoor learning space? Like, how do we define this and measure it and then track it? And then, yeah, set that high level goal so we can start to move forward on it. But yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is good to know. I think we probably still have a few more things that we could talk about here, but I also want to make sure we spend enough time with the folks that have joined us tonight to talk about the decarbonization roadmap. And so let's jump to that item. And then if we end up having some time,
James, can I
discussion.
propose one recommendation to the dashboard? And it also piggybacks off some of the things that were said in the room, but could we have a column in there that says potential known risk? Like if there is a hockey stick, if there is, funding. I'm also interested to understand if there's any potential impacts on what you're tracking, if there is a strike within PPS with teachers and how that'll affect the education portion of our goals, just mostly because that's been an area that I've been vocal that I think is not getting enough attention and is not moving quickly enough. So that would just be a recommendation of mine. And then I don't know, Kat, if you have any questions about that. But.
Yeah, I think just I'll say similarly, it's hard to know what's at risk and on track when we were working on that evaluation to really measure the outcomes of the activities that are happening, if that makes sense. So I think I can speak to like which of the activities might be at risk or on track given different things that are going on in the district. But I think once we have this action plan really fleshed out, we'll be able to have a much better idea of what benchmarks we should be meeting, which will help us know when goals are at risk or on track. And I know all of this sounds really, it's hard because this sounds really not defined, and I like to use the word squishy. So I think it can give off the impression that PPS isn't doing much in these ways. I think the real issue is that there's been a lot of activity going on for so long without a central way of communicating or planning or supporting it. It just happens because this is the culture of PPS. And so I just really want to emphasize that it's not a lack of activity or movement towards these goals. That is a reflection of not having these things nailed down. It's just because the culture has been, this is what we do here, regardless of if it's measured or supported, if that makes sense. And so I guess that's the only thing I want to say to that. So I totally agree that we can have a risk column. I'm just going to articulate that it's hard to know what's at risk if we don't have a specific benchmark and outcome that we're headed towards yet, but that all of this should hopefully not be an issue next year, because hopefully we will have this action plan totally fleshed out by March. So, and the roadmap for that will give us a really clear idea of what might be, what timeline and progress we need to be working on for specifically that pillar 1 target carbon goals, which are probably going to be our most difficult to meet, I would say, and that's why they're the most clearly defined, which may be a good segue. To our team here. I'm gonna pull up our
Are you gonna present?
yeah.
I'll kick it off really quick. So I think I know most of you. My name's Aaron. I'll be managing the decarb project along with Ari, who's sitting behind me. And we have our team consultant team today to give you a presentation on kind of what the scope of work looks like and what the engagement plan looks like. I'm not going to take up too much more time. I think I'm just going to Tim and the team to present, and then we can have a discussion and answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. It's like, Kat, you're going to bring that back up.
I am, yeah. I'm just sharing my screen real quick. Here we go. Here.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so as you heard in the introductions, I'm Tim with PAE. I'll be the project manager for PAE's team on this. We're the sort of prime consultants with our other consultants with us here today. Yeah, so, we are here, first of all, to meet you all and have you meet us and know who we are and what we're up to. And we very much want to know who you are and what you're up to. And I've already learned some of that. So I think this is going to be very useful. We want it to be a conversation. We don't have a presentation today that is sort of comprehensive of everything that the decarbonization roadmap is. Really, we came here today to focus specifically on one of the tasks that we've identified, one of the first ones, which is stakeholder engagement. So we're happy to talk more about the other tasks that we have in terms of the actual analysis, the storytelling at the end, the creation of the roadmap. But really today we were thinking mostly talking about the stakeholder engagement because we heard it was a topic that there was kind of some particular interest around discussing. So that's the focus of the few slides that we have. I'm going to have O Planning. So to introduce our team and why there are 4 different firms working on this, we each have slightly different areas of expertise. So we're all sort of leaders in decarbonization planning in different respects. PAE is mechanical and energy engineers. We do the energy analysis, we do mechanical designs. We're very familiar with the systems and the engineering that go into reducing carbon emissions, but we can't do it all. So we have O Planning and Design with us here, Deb and Nathan. They are experts at stakeholder engagement, as well as architectural design and bringing, energy efficiency through architectural components, but really that key stakeholder piece. So Deb's going to do most of the talking today as leading that part of the project for us. We also have Amoresco with us here. So Jerry introduced himself. Amoresco brings cost estimating expertise, they bring constructability expertise, and they bring a deep knowledge of the many facilities that you all have, right? So we need to have realistic expectations for 98 sites and how we're going to do that, and Amoresco can kind of manage that reality of it. And then we have Riley here with New Buildings Institute, a national thought leader on these topics, really good at stakeholder engagement, yes, but also telling the story at the end. So NBI will be very much supportive of O Planning's work in the beginning with stakeholder engagement, and then taking the lead with O Planning and us supporting them at the end when we're getting back in the communities, telling what we've done, celebrating the progress, getting the plan out there. So it's kind of somewhat subtle difference between what O and NBI are going to be leading. And with that, I'll hand it over to Deb on the next slide.
Thanks, Tim. And as Tim said, we want this to be conversational, so we only have a few slides, and this next one for us has emerged as a topic we wanted to engage you with, and that is defining what the conversation is as we reach into our communities and start discussing the topic of decarbonization, which to a lot of people might be alienating or even not interesting. And we want it to be interesting. This is courageous and it's transformative work. And it impacts all of our lives and the lives of our community. So to be able to express the message in a way that feels relevant to everyone is critical to our success for engagement. And so I just put an example on the slide saying that we're removing the dependence of carbon fuel systems at each school site, which will result in healthier schools. Another thought I've had in the last few days is to really frame this in the context of accountability for how we source our power. And there's many more conversations we could have, and that's something that even after we run through these slides today, we'd love to get your feedback. But will definitely be critical as we move into community engagement. On the next slide is a timeline that I am not going to go into, but you should have seen this as part of our team proposal. So we laid out many layers of stakeholders, starting with PPS and moving through to students and faculty and community members. And our understanding of what you're asking in this process is that we want to have a broad reach. And so trying to do that within the framework of the scope that we are doing is what the next slide shows you in terms of process and timeline. So starting with the red square at the top, I've really simplified Tim's wonderful Gantt chart into something that an architect can understand.
And the community for that matter.
So we're right at the beginning, and reviewing existing documentation is our challenge and task at this point. And then we move into the analysis of each individual sites, which lasts between November and March of next year. And that will be organized in a way that focuses on the Title I and high priority schools at the very beginning. Amoresco and PAE will be organizing that information. And as part of our engagement with you, we anticipate perhaps on a monthly basis, we'll come in and you will hear the progress that we've made and some of our findings and discoveries. So you'll be at the ground level of hearing that information. And then once we're through that process, we go into prioritizing and preparing the roadmap. And that lasts from March through July of 2024. And so there's going to be a lot of steps in that engagement level that's shown in yellow there, where we are also getting your feedback and getting stakeholder input. And then we move into the storytelling and sharing the outcomes with the community, where Riley really steps in and I get to shadow her and support her in that process. So what I want to share and actually invite feedback on with this is our original proposal had some upfront information gathering workshops, 5 to be specific, within the context of the community. And I understand that that doesn't work really well with the high school catchment areas, but Ari, I've heard that you kind of have some ideas about how those 5 zones might work, and there's overlays would be suggested so that somebody has more than one opportunity to participate, because we don't want to narrow it down to the point where people are just unable to join in because of their schedule or life circumstances. And then at the end, we have the engagement with the outcomes. And that was our original proposal, but we've heard feedback already, thank you, Kat, that it's possible that it would be more successful, and that's the blue bars at the bottom, to do 3 levels of engagement. One in the beginning, as we had discussed, and one right at that transition between the analysis and the prioritization, where we're raising awareness and also allowing more feedback to be sent to us, and then the outcomes meeting at the end. And maybe this is a good time to pause and just ask you what your thoughts are about that.
I have a lot of thoughts. One, my organization, we do community engagement around energy justice, grid modernization, decarbonization, and nobody finds it boring. Like, people come to that and are excited to learn and participate and want to be part of solutions. So it's a little troubling to me to hear you start off by saying people find this boring. It's not my experience at all, and the people that we have come to stuff. And I hope that isn't set your mindset. People get really excited about looking at solutions, and especially if those solutions are directly related and relevant to them. I would ask you, when we talk about engagement from a justice perspective, we often use a scale of engagement. So what are you engaging people for? Are you engaging them to inform them? Are you engaging them to co-create something together? People don't like to come to things if they're going to just be talked at and then not able to participate in the solutions. So that's why I don't know, because we're getting a very superficial kind of definition of what this is at this point, because it's high level. But what do you really want? And why are you asking people to be there? Sometimes that means in the beginning, a lot of education, totally, what you're doing and why you're doing. But just asking people to come so we can kind of tick a box and give people cookies at a meeting, that's not justice-driven engagement.
Agreed.
Right? So where on that spectrum do you want people really informing and helping to create a plan? There are parts where it's very technical that the engineers have to do, right? That's just going to be an engineer thing. I get, we do residential energy efficiency. So I know in that small scale, that house, every single house is a little puzzle piece. And that has to be the building staff that know the technical side. But how we then engage a homeowner and that decision-making and education and use has to be like very participatory. So that's where I want to asking you, like, why are you doing this beyond it was required? How is it really going to inform decision-making or prioritization? Because that's how people really want to be involved, especially in a justice-driven approach to community engagement. So like, you know, we try to go on to like collaborate further down a scale, build it together, and even then defer to people who are the ones most impacted. And again, it kind of depends. Not everything can you do that. Like that building science in those buildings, the building science, right? And like an average community person isn't gonna know that technical side.
Yeah.
But I would push this to really think that through. Why, who's coming, how their voices are going to inform, not just to like listen and make sure people are aware. That's like not enough in a justice-driven kind of engagement process. And so that's just like I'm asking because I don't know in this kind of just high level.
I want to address your first comment because this is very important and passionate, and everyone in this room is a strong advocate. And decarbonization is something that we care deeply about. And I chose a poor word there. I think the intent of that point was we want to reach people who aren't passionate about it as we are.
Sure.
And I don't think that's everyone in our community. I mean, I know we have a lot of like-minded people here, and those people are going to help us, but I really want us to be able to reach deep. So that was the point I was trying.
Sure, we talk to a lot of different people all the time that don't know any. I mean, like when you start talking grid modernization and distributed energy resource, nobody knows what that means, like, right? And like an average community setting. So, right, I get that.
Yeah.
Take some education to bring people along.
Get people excited about it. And we want people to be excited. It's very exciting work.
Oh, I think so.
So to your second point, which I think we have a couple of high level slides. We aren't diving into the minutia of this, but we have thought about what that engagement looks like. And it is not just sharing information. It won't be successful if that's all it is. So we agree with you 100% that we need to create active engagement opportunities to get people's feedback in a way that is specific. They're going to be caring about their school, that school that they're associated with. And so we're going to help to get their feedback in an active way. And there's more than one path to doing this.
Oh, absolutely.
But we've laid out a few discussion items here in this slide that we can.
I'm not asking about like the tactile tasks in the room. I'm asking about where are the points where those discussions inform decisions in the plan? Because there's many ways, you're right, in the room to make it more interesting and interactive and go in different learning styles. But like, how does that really inform the plan?
I mean, if we're literally looking for
I don't know, a lot of engagement.
Sorry to interrupt people in the room. It's hard to see you. So I as well do equity work along with charity, and I would say I hear in the room that there's a desire to have the feedback. So maybe what I would recommend, and Charity, I don't know if this would get to your point, is possibly putting some points into your plan onto that slide that show where you're going to kind of the slow down points where you might pivot and flex based on the feedback that you've heard, because it really does look like you have a very short window for feedback in the early part of your plan. And I think it brings to mind for me, how are you going to recruit? How are you going to get true engagement? Like what you mentioned, you want people who are maybe not excited about decarbonization, but those that you kind of want a broader reach. So that might mean that you're going to have to take a lot more time in the beginning to build that trust in those relationships to get the feedback that you need. So if you could maybe put that in your timeline there, I think that that would be really helpful. And I had a question, which is also, I guess, related to my recommendation, but how do you plan on getting recruitment? Because my experience is to get that deep participation, it can take a year to build a true, authentic relationship with somebody. And I just do not see that happening this year. But maybe you already have relationships and I don't know. So if you could speak to that, that would be great.
So I think that challenge has come up in our own internal discussions, and I agree. We want to do this in the timeline that is very efficient and build on what I believe in the kickoff meeting, which I didn't attend in the first week of September, but the kickoff meeting discussed that there are vehicles in place that you've already built with your community engagement that we can start to work from. Is that true?
Yeah, well, there's a couple different pathways that we were discussing as like potential ways of bringing people together. One of which was a discussion around all of the knowledge in this committee and the rooms, and potentially being able to, ask to engage you all in if there's particular community members that you think would be really excited, or networks or resource groups that you would be able to share this opportunity with, just to like broaden the reach of engagement. We have a really wonderful and just wealth of excellent community partners that participate in our racial equity, social justice programs that I've been working with our ResJ team to think about what it would look like to bring in different either community partners or ask to share with different different community members to just reach a broad audience. And we have put aside funding to pay for different CBOs to be present at these different partnership, engagement meetings. So that way we can really value their time and their expertise and make sure that, they're getting full participation and partnership, especially if we're asking for potential ongoing engagement, where it starts with like this initial feedback information stage, and then how can we continue to engage these folks over the year through those different blue points that you all mentioned. And then also talking about different forums, like we have Let's Talk at PPS, and how can we use that system to be able to, if people have questions about this process, then that's something that could be, directed to me or someone on the team to help answer questions about it. We could have an ongoing like community engagement forum or something. Like there's just like a couple different channels that we could work with our communications team to broadcast these opportunities widely, but then also work with our, we know the people who know our students and our buildings the best are the people who work and live in these buildings. And so how can we, really work with different teachers, like our sustainability champions teachers, to engage them in these discussions, our amazing forthcoming climate justice youth advisory students who are passionate and have been in these schools for most of their careers as well. There's just those types of different opportunities that we're just kind of looking at that network map right now of where can we make this more of a place to bring together, trusted groups of members of the community who have a deep love and connection to this place, to be able to like really dive into some of these questions around priorities and what does this look like for your school and what matters to them.
So Kat, to that point, maybe what would be helpful when we're engaging communities, I think first, let me say, yes, I would be open to sharing any relationships that I have to try to get people connected. But maybe early on in the engagement process, what would be really helpful is to establish like, this is where we're at. Unfortunately, we have a tight timeline. We have key things that we need to deliver by the end of the year. There are some things we won't be able to change, but here's where the decisions can be made in the process and where we can be flexible. And I think establishing that would go a long way to like managing expectations and helping people to know where their feedback will be heard. And I think, Kat, you probably have a lot of that, already in the documentation that you have.
I just want to say kind of ditto to what Angela just said. I think like this question that we're all sort of reiterating is what like genuinely are we asking for? And just to be really clear with folks about what they can expect to influence in this process and be able to help with prioritization, can they? And I don't know if you can even offer us right now some examples of what you expect that to look like. And if not, then yeah, definitely
Think about it.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying,
and
but
maybe
think about
next time we're chatting, or yeah, it'd be great to understand that. I want to make sure Diane, oh, sorry,
Sorry.
gets a chance to
I'm
chat.
also curious, like, how do you translate a counterfactual and some tangible? These are communities where the effect of the use of fossil fuels is something that they deal with. So how do you help them understand what the impacts are, as well as what the potential benefits are from the decarbonization roadmap? Like, I'm really curious how you expect to have that discussion. Fish doesn't move on. Okay. And then another point I'd like to make, which is I agree with everything that's been said about the need for deeper community engagement. I'm also in the timeline genuinely concerned that, we have an obligation to report to the board at the end of May, I think generally. And it doesn't like the roadmap is going to be done in time. The context of earlier discussions where a lot of the work again this year is around planning for action and not. This is not just about the decarb roadmap, but the decarb roadmap on other aspects of work. Like, I don't know, Aaron, I know your team's already raised the policy and it's likely already changing how to make decisions in response to that. It'd be really good to surface some of the actions that are taking place as well as the planning. We don't know if, I'm concerned that we're adding to the urgency of the hockey stick in another year of planning efforts.
Yeah, it's a good point. And there is a lot of work going on. We're walking, chewing gum at the same time, right? Like we're planning, we're also implementing, right? The whole point of the plan is to be more strategic about it, because up until pre-policy adoption, there was a lot of ad hoc work going on. Doesn't mean it's not good work, it just means it's kind of just, okay, well, what are we doing now? What are we doing next? Going forward, you need this kind of strategic plan and to really embed it into what multiple departments are working, right? Instead of just each department kind of doing their part and just stitching along.
And if you didn't have an electrification policy focusing on that.
Right, exactly.
But I've done other factors of why you might do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just to give you a little bit of like background on the timeline for this process, like this RFP was issued in March, right? And we got through the process. There was a holdup at the board meetings a couple of times. You probably saw that. So we're already a little bit behind schedule than what we originally thought. So we've already had to reshuffle our priorities, which is why it looks a little bit tighter than it might have been if we were here, 3 months ago. So
Completely appreciate that. Just trying to like keep the tightness, but then also somehow get deep at the same time.
Don't like the tightness. So like, I think for the success of the program long-term, not just about this roadmap, right? If that's the first engagement we do through this process, then it's going to set the tone for other engagement efforts. So there's a balance between like how that starts, because that's going to be trust building with different communities. And if we don't take that road to begin with, even in a tight time frame, we risk making it much worse later on.
For a second. I mean, it sounds like you, Charity, and I know Angela, you mentioned this too, that you have some really deep engagement expertise, and obviously you're spending a lot of time doing this already, but we could really benefit from your deep engagement expertise, both of you or anyone else as well. I wanted to speak to what I asked about making this tangible for students. So I do a lot of work nationwide with schools about this, and the one thing, of course, that we're seeing everywhere is the heat issue, where it's not only heat that we're seeing, like our physical spaces are getting hotter, like our rooms are getting hotter, we're having to shut down schools, but like, that bridge out there is getting physically hotter to touch because it's hotter everywhere. So it's really all about making what Deb said earlier about healthier buildings, pointing out what that means. It's like the heat in the room. It's that this wall, like on a hot day, is so hot to touch. How can we fix that? It's talking about like that HVAC that you didn't notice before is running constantly, and it's so loud now, and it's interrupting the learning, the learning process. So those are the kinds of things that we really want to communicate to the community that will be, I mean, I don't want to say it's like perfect and it will all be fixed and rainbows, but like those are parts of what we're trying to work through this plan and trying to identify with the community. We don't need to know like you know, if the roof tile is falling out, but we want to know how people are feeling in their physical spaces and how what we're doing can impact that, how they're experiencing their physical space. That's what I always want to hear from kids, teachers, adults. I mean, it's not just the kids, right? It's the staff. It's this building is one, as I'm like hot and cold at the same time. Yeah, it's like I keep thinking
Nothing I can do about that, right?
The problem sometimes with this is there's a lot of different communities that we're all kind of talking about, right? There's the staff, there's building maintenance folks, there's students and teachers in the building, there's the broader family, like that's hard to know what this, because there's multiple definitions of community. And how you do that will vary depending on which community you're talking to. And obviously you had different tracks in there, and I know you know that, but like right now, like my mind community is somewhere else because I'm not a person in the building every day, right? So like just that idea of like, what community are you really gonna be engaging in this process? How are you defining community makes such a difference in like who's being invited?
And I mean, I think right now, today, we're still very much information gathering,
Okay.
right? Like that's why we're here, is to hear this feedback. So we don't have the details of the engagement sessions worked out, and we will, and they're gonna be great. But we're trying to get this information first and talk to you guys. And we had some discussion points up about who are the groups that we should engage? What do you think? Who are your connections? What are roadblocks we're likely to see? So I definitely do want to talk more about that. I also want to address the point about people don't just want to be taught to or talked at, they want to be sort of part of the process and informed decisions. And I think the reality is that certain things are just going to be more explanatory in nature. Like there's just no two bones about it costs this much to do that, and these are the carbon implications, right? That's an engineering.
Absolutely, that's what I said. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the building
But there's-
science is the building science.
There's other pieces which are like prioritization of different metrics that we're trying to hit, where that feedback does become very important. And I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of different opinions then, but it's like, how do we think about the health implications of adding air conditioning? How do we think about doing things in one school versus another? How do we think about the equity pieces and weight against carbon and cost? And that's definitely less quantitative. Probably also difficult to get one answer. But Deb, and I don't know if you have anything else to add on that point, but I see that's where the community feedback kind of informing what we do on those difficult to quantify pieces.
And I will say that the community feedback will influence the roadmap. We will take even that early upfront information gathering is going to factor into our thinking as we move through the process. And we're going to each of the sites and gathering the data. We'll have that in our minds. And then if we do the alternative approach to engagement where we have that midpoint connection, that's going to help us even more because we're right at that nexus between gathering the assessments and analysis and prioritization. And we will receive valuable feedback from that process. My biggest concern is this could be such a wonderful rainbow of engagement, and we have 5 meetings up front and 5 meetings at the end. And that's where the network map and identifying our CVOs and your own success stories of engagement can come together and work together on how to get the message out.
I wonder, like the chart that we looked at earlier, that is quite a comprehensive list of community and the definition of who those different groups are. And it, again, it comes back to the question of like, what do we want to understand from these different groups in our school community? And maybe it doesn't have to be so comprehensive with all the stakeholder groups that we talk to, because it really depends on what the question we're asking is and what kind of information we need. So you might be able to tighten up that engagement process by being more targeted and focused and genuine about what we're trying to get out of it.
It's something we even just really briefly talked about at the kickoff meeting was like bringing a really, diverse community group together and then breaking out into breakout sessions based on like students versus teachers versus parents, or, students, what kind of CTE pathways, how do you want to learn from your building? Like, how do you want your building experience to feel like? And like maintenance folks, what do you need to be successful in a building with this new technology? Like being able to kind of bring folks together and then like really dive into the juicy stuff based on but that was just like a quick brainstorm. Like, again, we don't have the details lined out, but there's just, I think there's some ways to kind of make this, and kind of reach a couple different.
Being clear about.
Really like recognize that like there's ways that we can maybe break out to different groups, but also still like have a great group. I do want to make space for Diane, because I know that this is like really your area, and would love to, I know you're on it's hard to jump in when you're on the call. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate the discussion so much. And I want to say thanks to my colleagues who are raising really, really critical questions. I think for me, the prioritization is really key. Equity is, for me, at the heart of all of this. And I would like to, I feel like this is such a huge task. There's so much baggage. There's so many years, decades, maybe even centuries, I would say, of not engaging people properly. And so, yeah, trust building is critical. But I think what would be helpful in this particular moment is to I'm leaning into more of what Angela is saying about, and both Charity and Angela are talking about trust building. There's only so much that we can do this year, and that's clear, right? We are needing to have more time. We're needing to have more money. And this is going to be the tiniest slice. So the most important thing is like, definitely we don't want to alienate folks. But we do want to I think we can make progress by drilling down a lot deeper into not just the relationships with CBOs, but how can those CBOs be more effective at reaching the most impacted? I know they are. I know that they are. What I worry about is not just communities of color, but people with disabilities, people who are poor, folks who are really literally on the front lines of climate change. And we need to be able to see those folks in the whole community engagement process. And I don't think it's an issue of are they interested or not? If they're not interested, it's because of that alienation. And I don't think you have to be, in love with climate justice or the issue of climate justice for it to be critical, central to your life over the next 10, 20, 50 years, right? So who are those folks that are going to be impacted by climate? And maybe they don't even really have the capacity to engage the issue right now. More than likely, if they can't, that's, they are going to be impacted. So we just need to figure out how to make central folks that are really marginalized, and then I'll be happy. And then I'll be a lot more happy. I don't see anything. I don't see anything that suggests that we are able to do that. And there's a part of me that doesn't even expect it, because Portland has this problem. And so I want us to be making progress just conceptually on it, just to be conceptually able over the next, 12 months to get a better analysis about how we reach folks who are most impacted.
Thank you, Diane. I think that's a fantastic point. I think it aligns well to the suggested discussion that the design team put up about defining the community groups and stakeholders. So the questions come to mind that are probably worthy of a discussion. Who are the marginal, in the context of PPS's decomposition law, who are the most marginal? And I'm also the other question I had was, this, going back to you and your team, Aaron, like, when we're talking about building trust, are there groups from the community who have already been heavily engaged in school redevelopment that maybe are people who already have some level of trust and representation maybe built up from a facilities perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think part of the expertise that Deb brings is, her firm has worked on some of our modernization work, and they've done that deep engagement work as part of those, like Kellogg Middle School as an example. I know that the Jefferson modernization team has been doing a lot of good work on that front too. So I think there is some, I mean, this contract has been executed for, I think, 2.5 weeks now. So we're very in the early stages. So there is going to be some cross sharing. We can go to those teams and say, hey, like, what worked for you, what didn't work. There's lessons learned there, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities to learn from those teams.
I also think, oh, sorry.
I can tell you, okay, so we do energy justice, right? So climate justice, but specifically energy justice. So there's like the Oregon Just Transition Alliance, there is Unite Oregon, there's Coalition of Communities of Color. There are plenty of local groups. My organization, Community Energy Project, we all do community engagement around energy justice and climate justice. And, like Diane said, like those are the people that we talk to every day. Low income, BIPOC communities, people with disabilities, people care passionately, people want to be involved. But I think Diane hit it right, like what she said. That's why we're all kind of talking and everyone's saying about the trust building. So because people have been disenfranchised and not been able to be part of a process in a meaningful way. Right? We've all get asked to go to processes that are like government or pseudo government, where literally we go and we fill out some forms and we tell you what we think, and then nothing really changes.
But it's
or if maybe it did, but that never got that. Right? That you never knew if that input made a difference. Right? So I think there are really good groups right now doing really innovative work on the ground. That we're all really busy. Like,
it probably isn't a perfect, like, this is.
No, there's no perfect.
No, this is just a question. I can't imagine it's a perfect overlap between the communities that are engaged with a just energy transition that probably include everybody, as opposed to the ones that are within a reasonable scope for PPS's decarbonization. It probably is worthy of some thought of who are the marginalized folks within the scope of PPS.
Well, it's low income communities of color. That's often who.
But with the connection to PPS.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us work through SUN programs and do existing work with SUN programs, or like SEI does really interesting stuff, or like we do less with students as an organization. We're more adult education, but some of the groups I mentioned, they do lots of student led work, or it just depends on what community they're working in, or try to, Oregon Just Transition, they're statewide, for example, or Unite Oregon, they're statewide often, but like they have local branches around. They're just examples, right?
No, I think they're really good. I keep going back to Diane's comment about taking time to identify who the right marginalized populations are to try, and that's probably where the investment of time and resources is best spent.
I want to bring up time really quick.
Yes,
No, that's why we were really excited to bring these folks to this meeting, because I was like, I got some great people around too. So I did want to bring that up, and if there maybe is an opportunity that we could work out for like follow-up discussion, or it might segue nicely into our next agenda item, which is work groups. If there's someone that's really interested in helping out with this group.
One last comment.
Yeah, of course.
Another reason why I think it's so important to do this right. We all know like the political conversations right now around the school budget and around teachers and around the budget to fund teachers. And like, if we're going to go out as a community, as a team here, asking for money to do this work, which is incredibly important, we need to make sure people understand and are invested in it.
Absolutely.
And that we don't have a political situation where people are saying we have to choose between teachers and health. Right? We need everyone to understand this work is just as important for the health of our planet, for the health of our students and teachers in the building. And it's going to cost money, and we need to invest in that, and we need to invest in teachers in the classroom.
Absolutely.
So if we don't do this right, people won't feel connected and invested in this work.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that point, because I think that that is at the heart of what we're talking about. Is we are a public service agency. We are sometimes the only community public, building in an area in an extreme climate event that they might have access to a space to go to, regardless of whether or not they have a direct connection to PPS. And those are the kinds of things we need to be thinking about. And so I think that's where this engagement process can be really beneficial, is to not only get an idea around the decarbonization priorities, but really start to meet the folks that are like that most use and need these buildings in their communities. Especially as we are going to inevitably need to go out and find funding sources for this, or also be able to advocate at the state level and beyond of what kind of the seriousness of the funding that needs to be allocated to this at a larger level too. So thank you for articulating that. It's really important.
So I would invite the project team to, through Kat, anyone on the committee who doesn't feel comfortable with this, please let Kat or I know offline. But I think we'd be happy to chat more via email. Like if there's things that you were hoping to get out of tonight that you haven't heard, had a chance to talk about yet, then maybe we can start a follow-up by email. And there might be some individuals that have extra content that they want to share. So why don't we start with that? And if we want to get together again in person, then we can also talk about doing that.
I also wanted to know, I know Ruwan is on the call too. Did you need to say it? Did you want to jump on at all just as part of the project management team? I realize you're the only one who hasn't had a chance to talk to you.
No, I appreciate it. No, it's a good discussion that we're having. I think one thing I was thinking about as the discussion was happening is that I think we're all saying the same thing, right? I think we're all coming from the same desire to connect with the community and do the right thing. I think Tim kind of highlighted the fact that we're like 2 weeks in, right? So we haven't had a chance to really dive in. Deb hasn't had a chance to really figure out the engagement plan yet. So all of these points that you guys are bringing up, excellent points. We totally agree with you. We got to figure out together how we optimize that engagement and get to the people that we need to get feedback from. So that's the only thing that I'm thinking. Yeah, we agree. And any feedback and any support that you guys have, we would take it with open arms. So thanks for the opportunity to come talk to you guys.
I want to add to that. We're so excited about this decarbonization roadmap.
Yeah.
I hope that we kind of
It's exciting.
got a dog with a bone on a certain element of the project. And it's just something that we we all care about so much. And we really appreciate you taking the time to come tonight and come to a, collective understanding of what we're trying to do here. And we're really excited about the work and what the proposal included. It's going to be something.
But we kind of got together, authored a letter in strong support of this one, so try to encourage them.
Pass it.
Exactly.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah. So thank you. We do really want to support this process as much as possible. So please think of us as a resource forward. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks. So we wanted to take a little bit of time in our committee to talk about working groups for the year, and feel free to stick around or feel free to get home to your families. Either way.
I'm gonna go home to my family. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Good night. Thanks for coming.
Good night. Good night.
Diane, are you going to stick around? Are you waving goodbye? Don't go.
Just to Ruwan. just to Ruan.
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to first raise, we've talked about turning over the chair role, and I'm checking in about potential interest for taking over as chair. I did talk to Charity, and I know that she is interested in and willing to step up. But I also wanted to make sure there was an opportunity for anyone else, and it doesn't have to be an individual. We could look at a co-chair model or a vice chair as well. So is anyone else interested in taking on more of a leadership role this year?
Jane, I don't know. I mean, you were so great at this role. Like, how could anyone fill your shoes?
Oh, thanks, Angela. I'm confident
Charity could do a good job. I know she could.
Yeah. Good hands.
Do a lot of boards.
I do want to echo what Angela said, Jane, you've
You've
been
done
fast.
the best.
Oh, thank
Really
you.
encouraging.
Yeah, well, it's
I support Charity 100%, and I hope, I know that I will be juggling a lot this coming year, but I am hoping to definitely increase my, both my capacity and my support of the entire team here. And Charity, please, if I can be helpful to you personally as you move into a leadership role, please do, call on me. I will try to be there for you. But I'm 100% behind Charity, and delighted that Charity has stepped up.
yeah, me too. Thank you, Charities. I think we should probably have a formal motion to change the chair and vote on that. So
Have to introduce the motion.
okay. Anyone second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
In favor.
I'm gonna abstain.
I don't know. Any opposed? Thank you. Well, thank you, Charity, for stepping up. I'll just wrap up the meeting. Unless you want.
No.
I was just gonna say, well, I will offer to. Do you want to?
No, go
The
ahead.
other item is just to talk about working groups.
No, go ahead. Finish the meeting. Then I'll be prepared for next time.
Oh, because I did chat with Kat a little bit about it in advance of this meeting. There was a discussion about continuing with the dashboard working group.
Yeah, I know Eric had mentioned being available to, support that. And if anyone else wants to participate, I have a much more tangible, everything about this year's scope of work is a lot more fleshed out and tangible, which I think will give a much more productive discussion. So I would just probably schedule a meeting, on alternate months, probably to our committee meetings, and just kind of check in with ideas and stuff like that. So that's one that was offered from one of the committee members that expressed interest.
And I'd be willing to serve on that group again this year.
Yeah.
So you can sign me up for that.
I'd be happy to continue.
Okay.
We
That
kind of
was,
initially have this
yep, you
discussion.
and I and Eric, yeah.
Absolutely.
I have a question kind of about the committee, the subgroup. So before I make a determination on if I can be in a subgroup, I had a question about conflict of interest. So there is going to be a committee or group for Cleveland High School to modernize that high school. That's where my son will go next year. I wanted to know if there is a conflict of me being in that group because I'm on this committee. And if there is, then I will join a subcommittee for the committee. Does that make sense?
What would the conflict be? Is it?
I don't know, because I mean, we're like Cleveland's modernizing the school, right? And as committee members, we're helping with that policy and shaping that policy and monitoring it. I didn't know if anyone saw an issue with that. So I just want to make sure that there's no issue before I throw my name in the hat for that.
Can I jump in here and say that a lot of folks, and conflict of interest is defined differently in different contexts, but typically, and I think this is really kind of critical, especially for our type of work, having an interest is not a conflict. That's actually an asset. A conflict is more like, are you going to personally gain either, financially or maybe politically you're running for office or something like that. But usually it's like comes down to financially. So if you don't have a financial stake in, you're not going to receive some contract or something like that, conflict of interest is generally not a concern.
Okay. Well, then I am TBD on subcommittees right now because I'm fully vested in my son's high school.
Yeah, that's great too, because ideally the modernizations actually will get to be the true example of what the policy looks like on the ground. So you'd actually be probably someone that's like, will be a gem to get to be in.
Yeah.
There. So,
Yeah, I think it's nice.
Thank you.
CCRC would be represented there. I think that's
We did
important
some
work for
really
the committee.
Policy specific engagement sessions just for the Jefferson modernization too, just to like really center that as like, this is what we're going for. So I think that's really exciting.
I mean, I almost think, Angela, you just created a working group. As
Yeah.
high school
Okay, if there's a working group for that, I'll lead it.
Broadly building upgrades.
There was another working group that we talked about.
Community.
Budget, right? Or
Yeah.
I thought we'd also talked about a community outreach.
We did talk about a community.
About the need to engage community more.
I think that's pathways.
Yeah, and that work is
So you
getting
have a process for this.
Yeah,
that
and
you
that-
can plug into.
And that was supposed to launch November 3rd and is currently being discussed about getting pushed back into the start of the new year. And so there's some more pre-work that can be done with that. So that's my long way of saying that process is going to be really exciting and actually in parallel with the decarbonization roadmap engagement. So just if anyone wants to be engaged on that kind of engagement pathways / just like really digging into the like what does deep engagement at PPS look like, which could be mirrored to all these things, that I will definitely reach out on like thinking, doing some.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
On budget, like what would our role be? Because it seems like right now from the conversation earlier, it's just too. You just don't really know yet because we don't have like the building plan or you don't have like real concrete numbers. So what would you want this community to be looking at budget wise?
That's a really good question. And there is a there is an expectation that I will be putting together a more formal CCRP related budget ask for this year's budget session. And so being able to even reach out and say like, what are some things that we can be just as like thought partners and kind of what this looks like, that might be helpful. And then the part that I think our team is really struggling, I'm not going to use the word struggling. I think all public agencies right now are really grappling with some of the funding opportunities that are coming out that are especially like tax credit related, and some of the more technical things that like we don't have an in-house expert on. If those are areas that you all have expertise,
The federal.
the federal good stuff. Those are
I know all of that. So
we've been really grappling with how to best approach some of these things that we are still struggling to understand, and that the requirements for which are not even necessarily fully fleshed out yet. It made me feel a little better to hear so many other public agencies also be like, I don't know. It's hard because we're just excited to take advantage of all these things, but we're feeling a little bit.
Is there?
I mean, I'm happy to help on that stuff because I follow all that federal and I talk to DOE and I'm on a White House call tomorrow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I just, I'm concerned that you're too much of a wonderful one-stop shop charity. You're doing involved in everything.
I mean, like, I mean, here, I guess I don't need to be on a committee, but like, I'm happy to like, because I follow it anyway. So it's not that much of a big work.
Yeah.
Because I'm already in all of those conversations.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there's a part of the decarbonization roadmap scope that possibly equals optimization funding grant opportunities.
I
think a group like NBI
They
has
would know.
specific expertise in how to align building projects with grant
Mhm.
funding, IRA funding.
I think that was included in their scope.
Yeah.
Too.
They'll know that.
Yeah.
And they have the
And that might
national
be-
team that knows, like, I feel residential
Yeah.
more than other areas, right?
Yeah, and so I think in the budget realm too, we're thinking like for like this next year, really thinking about what like people power need to be in place to like really do this lift, since a lot of amazing things already happen with people power, and then thinking strategically about grants and then PISA funding and other things coming up, and then being able to forecast to just let our board know and our leadership know, here's the kind of funding we're going to need to be really talking about in the next.
And those are competitive.
Yeah.
Everybody in the whole country is applying for that stuff.
Yep.
So,
and it's so hard.
So hard to get it.
And it's hard to count, like put your ducks in that
can't.
basket or whatever the phrase is.
But like, there's some creative stuff coming out around resiliency hubs and like grid modernization, like how PPS can get involved in some of that resilient hub funding.
Yeah, that would be huge.
There's other kinds of.
And that's really more to our real and true goals too.
Yeah.
Like how to be
Specifically, and some really powerful legislation around CBREs, which I was real full acronym stands for, but community benefit resiliency areas. PPS is in a great position to create a project around CBREs, go after them. Funding. Could cover stuff like on-site solar, on-site battery.
So it does sound like there's a working group.
Yeah, I just was like,
that's
there's discussion, but it sounds like there is enough like knowledge and energy and need for something like that, that let's.
Yeah.
Would you like to, you're up to the, okay. And charity, I mean, we can also, maybe if we can outline these following the meeting and then make sure that the folks that weren't able to attend tonight have a chance to join or volunteer. Ari, you look like you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw out an idea for all of us to consider in the long term, which is that I love working groups, and I think this is a great pathway forward. And there's a lot of work to be done, and there's only so many of you. And I was just looking at the CCRP, which says that this committee is supposed to be no more than 9 members, and wondering if that is something that maybe we want to consider.
Oh, yeah, that's
changing.
a great idea.
I would love that.
I think that's no more than. I think it's
No
it's
more
really
than 9 persons. Yeah, and we could have 30 with lots of working groups. So just something for maybe for all of us to
To
consider.
go back as a quick, easy change.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
We're gonna add a
Student
couple
members.
students.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm just thinking about the sort of steering group that the city of Portland used for their climate action plan development process, and it's a long list of stakeholders, much more than 9, whatever it was. So
Oh, you have a PSAP list?
right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so before that, the city of Portland, like from years and years ago, so just something. to
And I think
consider
they
maybe
had
it's
a thing too.
The working groups could also include folks that aren't on a committee.
Sure.
Totally.
Yes.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
There's because that might be something that we have to work through the board and it might take some time, but in the interim.
We have people who are interested on a specific
knowledgeable,
topic.
yeah,
I really like that idea because I think having like people who maybe like are in PSAP or CBREs that actually be interested in adding their expertise to what successful partnership in these areas looks like.
and then we can just feed it up to the broader committee.
That's something we've talked a lot about too, is like the opportunity to apply for like regional funding opportunity. Yeah, that kind of
So
stuff.
we're applying for a grant that is, it's out of EPA and it's a community, a climate justice environmental block grant. And it has to be partnerships. And it's like, you have to apply for $10 million for 3 years. And so like, it's going to be looking at a lot of things like this, right? So there's other interesting things that come out that are around like creative projects together with like local government and nonprofits and so there's, I mean, anyway, yeah.
Okay.
We could
I mean, I
go
love
on
the idea.
forever in a
Yeah.
working group on that topic.
On that
Yeah.
topic, are there any other working groups that folks would like to see activated this year? And it's not the only chance to start a working group. I mean, we can talk about this.
Do we have to have one at the end of the year for that report again?
We will definitely have to have
But-
people writing the report.
Yeah, I
Yes.
was like, I don't want to write the report like.
And I just like to put in a plug on that note, and I'm willing to serve on that working group again this year. I think the board would love to see someone that's not me present the report this year. They'd love to see, more diverse voices is what we heard from Director DePass specifically. I think it would be really cool if we could include one of our student, if we can get one of our student members also at the table at least and presenting to the extent that they feel comfortable. So it's just something to really see to plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when do we get to meet the potential student representatives?
I think Kat said they make the decision on Monday and then you'll announce and then the board has to approve on October 1st or something.
10th is when I'm giving the materials for the October 10th meeting is due on Monday. And so they'll have those materials and then they'll vote. I might do a small presentation, kind of showing the process, and we have 30 applicants from 15 different sites.
Finally.
I know.
Yeah, good.
It's been very challenging.
Yeah.
Try and figure out what this looks like. And so and part of the questions included that, are you available at the date and time of all the meetings that were scheduled for this year? And so all those folks were available. So I was like, oh, why don't we make a youth committee that meets right before this meeting? And then we can engage them. And if they want to hang out after, they're more than welcome to, but they can be available for all of the things we talked about. But so I'm really excited.
I'm so delighted to hear that, Kat. Thank you so much for helping make that happen. I'm very much in favor of figuring out how to broaden and, create containers for all of us to work together and bring more folks in. It just seems like you're, totally on that path already. And it's great.
It's very exciting. Thank you. Another quick little tiny plug I will share is that I also have the honor of getting to facilitate and help support the district student council meetings this year. And they meet every Tuesday. They are a fantastic group of students with representatives from each of the high schools that talk about student leadership and really trying to raise student voices from their high school clusters to the board representative, the student representative of the board, and then they provide that perspective to the board. Just to plant that seed in case there's, questions or opportunities or things about, just engaging another group of students that are really awesome. Or if there's space on any of these groups that you're like, oh, this would be really great to have this kind of perspective, I can offer it to them as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. Any last burning items before we adjourn tonight? Thanks for staying late, everybody. Okay. Yeah, meeting's adjourned. Thanks everybody for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Jesse and Rosie, for taking notes.
You can go back and say you have an engaged committee, right?
Are we off now?